Hey, good afternoon, everybody. We're thrilled to be here with you this afternoon. It's the week of Valley Business Keynote 2018, which is going to be exceptional. We're going to be talking about radical candor in the Valley, but we wanted to wet your whistle just a little bit this afternoon and start the dialogue on looking what it is. Good news, bad news. The bad news is the event on Thursday is already sold out. That's a really good thing, right? We're excited about that. But if you get captivated by what we talk about today, what you hear reading the book and things like that, both WVPT and WHSV rebroadcast the speeches sometime in September. So if you stay tuned to this Facebook page, you'll be able to see when they're coming up and how you can continue to access them. We're going to chat some about radical candor in just a couple minutes. If you have questions, throw them out in the comments section. We're going to try to talk them into the dialogue that we're having over the time that we're able to spend together. My name is Dave Urso. I'm an academic dean at Blue Ridge Community College, and my wife and I run a consulting firm on the side. I am thrilled to have sitting alongside me Thomas Ray, who's the president of the Bank of the James, the Shenandoah Valley region, and we're going to chat about candor today. So we're glad to have you this afternoon.
Excited to be here.
Excited to be on Facebook Live?
Oh man, this is amazing.
Is this a first for you, or do you do it on your regular page all the time?
Usually more other, MySpace is usually my preferred platform. Yeah, I think that's still what the kids use today, right?
Do you have NSYNC as your song of choice?
Yeah, nothing that recent. No,
Got it, okay, it's a little more throwback.
Yeah, Hanson.
All right, yeah. Bop, to be able to do it.
That's right.
All right, so
Great way to start here.
We were chatting before we came on the air, and you were talking about that this book you've been able to both read and listen to the audio tape, and it's been intriguing to you. So tell me a little bit about that general reaction, what you took away, and what you think.
So I think one of the cool things about this book is there's just so much just practical information in it. At times it almost feels like too much practical because you're trying to implement things as you're reading or listening to it while you're still learning new things to do. I think one of the challenges that I've faced as a young up-and-coming leader in the Valley here is that there's all kinds of resources on developing yourself as a leader. What this book does is it bridges that gap for a leader to be a good manager. So how are you going to develop your team? How are you going to grow your team? How are you going to take what you do well and do it managing a team? And from a management standpoint, I mean, this hits the nail on the head for me. And I mean, honestly, I got done on a long drive from Maryland listening to this thing, and Monday morning I was meeting with teammates trying to use some of the stuff I'd listened to Kim talk about.
Motivated right out the gate, right?
Exactly. Could use it same day. So.
Now, one of the things, you're young for having such a high-profile role, which means part of what you do is balance diversity of staff, not only of ethnic background, but age as well. So you're probably supervising people who are older than you. Did you find anything specific that helped you as you enter these relationships where people may be harboring a grudge or have some issue with you and trying to help them?
Fortunately for us, we're still young. We're a small team. We've had a few folks rotate through in the couple of years we've been here in the Valley, and some have been, kind of those, experienced bankers, and then we've got some of those, fresh bankers now. And for the most part, because we're a small group, we've been able to keep a good rapport. I don't think there's ever been that kind of animosity. But I think one of the cool things in the book that Kim talks about is that, you've got your rock stars and your all-stars, right? Or you might call them superstars. Yeah, your rock stars and your superstars. Your rock stars are the people you can count on. They're going to show up day in and day out. They're going to do great work, but they're not really on a steep trajectory of growth, whereas your superstars, I mean, they're skyrocketing to the top. And she goes on to talk about how a lot of times for all of us, really, we are both of those at different times in our life and our career. And so when you have, just different teammates that, maybe they have young kids, or maybe they're done with kids, or whatever the case may be, maybe they haven't even thought about kids yet, knowing that as those life changes happen, it could change the trajectory of who they are, but they're still very valuable as in either one of those categories. So it really got me thinking about some of the people I've worked with before, some of the people I'm working with now, and just trying to be respectful and understanding of, okay, what in their life are they going through, and do I have them in the right fit and the right trajectory for their current work-life balance?
I think that's an amazing point, and when we reflect on our end about work-life balance, we talk about that lots, right? Because working in the academic environment, we have people who are working 8 to 5 some days a week, but we have people with night classes, people working weekends, saying I'm taking grading home and things like that. We have an ongoing dialogue about fair versus equal.
Yeah.
And I have a lot of conversations with staff of going, treating you equal does not necessarily always mean treating you the same. It means being consistent and equitable. So if somebody's got to go to a soccer game, we may work with that, but they're making up for it here. They got on email, and I don't expect that from you. And there are ways to say, based on where you are in life, I'm consistently going to look at you as an individual, and fair and equal may not always interplay.
Yeah. No, I think that's a great point. I think, certainly every company has certain restrictions, right? I mean, and even in our company, we've got certain people that we've got to keep the doors open. And so I can't just have everybody leaving early on a Thursday. I've got to have somebody there to keep the doors open, right? And sometimes that's me to help out with that process. But I think being respectful of, okay, what is it that, gives them, empowers them to be able to come to work and do a great job, and setting that proper expectation of what a great job is, right? I think that's the challenging part for most managers and leaders is, how do we get our team to understand what it is they're expected to do? Because just because I get it doesn't mean that they get it. But if you set those clear expectations, you kind of know what it looks like, then it's a lot easier to have autonomy and flexibility. And we have the ability at our organization, being a small organization, to be able to look at folks at the individual level and be able to empower them for given like who they are, what their circumstances is, and what they're trying to do and accomplish. And do we hit it 100% on nail on the head every time? No, but we're working towards that effort to try and really empower folks. And it's just one of the great things of working for a small bank and small group is to be able to say, all right, we're going to be individually focused on each one of you.
I love that concept, and how do we uplift the individual? And one of the points Kim makes is that it's not about what their trajectory is that you want it to be, but it's what they want that trajectory to be. So if I got little kids, I may be a rock star right now. I come in, I give you my solid, and I come out. Once my kids are in college, all of a sudden work becomes that redefiner, and I'm on that trajectory again. But have we got so caught in our own sort of framework that we lock out the ability to say, can I transition as life is unfolding?
Yeah, and and in all honesty, I mean, if I think about my wife and I, Jennifer and I have had that same conversation internally, right? We've got 2 young kids. They're just now getting into elementary school ages. And it's like, at different points in time, we've both been, either more or less committed to our jobs based off of where our kids are. And recognizing that, hey, I've got the opportunity to do well and to earn some money to help support us. She's sort of taken a secondary role to focus on the kids and work part-time. It's not to say that, she couldn't go back full-time. It's not to say that she won't at some point in time. But, but even still in that role, she's still doing a great job for her company. And I'm trying to do a great job for us and still have that work-life balance. So I think, kind of having that dynamic in our household helped me relate to what Kim was talking about there a lot more. And I think the point she hits on, and this is the struggle, right? This is the hard thing, is how do you get to know your teammates at that individual level to know that about them, right? Because, from an HR standpoint, I can't be like, oh, you thinking about having kids, or, you want to have kids, or how are your kids going to make you want to work part-time? Like, you got some landmines there from an HR standpoint. When
you're going to be pregnant. Just curious.
Yeah,
I'm just asking.
Just doing some 5-year planning here for the strategy. But at the same time, like, you want to give them the ability if they want to. I don't want them to ever feel like they can't have a family or they can't devote time to their family. And I think we do a good job of relaying that message. But, how do you get to know them at that individual level without becoming so personal that you're more of a friend than you are a manager, or more than a friend,
it's a slippery slope, right? Because you run into this because you got little kids now.
Yeah.
And we talk about that you may have one of your direct reports or even one of the frontline tellers who your kids are on the same soccer team or who they happen to go to church with you. So you're going to naturally have a closer relationship with that person. But you have to make sure that closer relationship doesn't influence how you're able to, back to the consistency point, interact with them moving forward. Have you experienced some of that?
Yeah, I think maybe not on the direct basis, but over the years, just there have been times where I've worked with certain folks that we did go to church together, or we did have similar experiences, or maybe we were even on the same fantasy football league, right?
Did you win?
It depends on the year. Yeah, I've had a few good years. Carson Wentz, man, if he'd have stayed healthy,
so close.
Had him, love that guy, But no, I think it's a challenge, and as you move on up the ladder in leadership and in management, you've got to be more careful, right? I could do a lot more as sort of like a grunt banker than I can do now, right? I mean, I've got to be a lot more careful, but still, letting folks know that I'm not just some robot, that I am a person, and a person they can relate to. So it's an ever-ending challenge. I think setting good boundaries with your employees, setting good boundaries with yourself and what you're willing to do. I find my wife is a good barometer of what my boundaries should be. So listening to my wife more is always a good solution on that train of thought. But yeah, I mean, it's a challenge, but I think it can be done, and it's just. Like I said, it's going to vary depending on personality too. So.
One of the things that jumped out at me as I was reading was the great advice that it gave of this is how to bubble it down.
Yeah.
Right? This is how to take care of those people who report to you. But what was left in my head is going, that's a one-way street. This is a two-way street or a three-way street. We need candor with our peers. We need candor from our supervisors, but also from our supervisees back up as well.
Yeah.
and that takes vulnerability. I want to read a quote, and I want to read it only because I want to get it exactly right. It's from early in the book, and she said, challenging people generally pisses them off.
Yeah.
And at first that doesn't seem like a good way to build a relationship or show that you care personally. Yet challenging people is often the best way to show them that you care. Can you think about yourself? This is a vulnerability question, a time you experienced sort of going in and being challenged by someone who you held close with, and what that felt like, and did it make you better as a leader, as a person of faith, as a father in some capacity?
Yeah, so I think so. I'll be honest. I mean, I'm the kind of guy, just with my background, my experiences growing up. If I get challenged, I go into immediate defense mode, right? So I've got that. That's something that I've got to deal with, and not everybody else experiences at that level. Maybe to a lesser degree, but not the level I do, I think. And again, my family and closest friends could tell you that. But I think I mean, as far as specific examples, I mean, I've been fortunate to have good bosses around over the years that were very direct with me, and would be open to my questions back to them. So I'm kind of thinking Steve Gordon, who was my mentor at United Bank, Rockingham Harriers before that. He was a guy who he would tell me exactly what he needed me to do and how I needed to do it. But I could also give him, hey, I think this should be done, or why do we do it that way, or like, really, is that what we need to do? And he was always just open to that conversation, more so than he probably needed to be. And it allowed us to build a rapport where we weren't necessarily going to go out and party together. I mean, we're a couple decades apart in age group, right? But at the same time, there's just a whole lot of respect that was built up, and I've got that now with the guys I report to and ladies I report to now on the exec team. Is that it's you give it as good as you get it. Kind of thing. And so we've built that trust in that relationship. And I think that's what Kim talks about, is that the vulnerability piece it starts with trust, right? You've got to be able to build that trust to be able to be vulnerable. Sometimes you got to start by being vulnerable to be able to build that trust, right? That's kind of a cycle that can often happen. And so I've experienced that as I've come up. So whether I do a good job of that with my teammates, you'd have to ask them, right? I like to think that I try to do a good job. Whenever they kind of come up with questioning a decision, questioning a strategic play, questioning how we're going to go about selling something, I try to kind of take the standpoint of, all right, where are they coming from with this, right? Are they questioning this because they think it's a bad idea? Are they questioning it because they don't fully understand what we're trying to accomplish? Are they questioning it because they just don't have experience? Or are they questioning because I'm wrong, right? Because I can be wrong. It's happened occasionally, right? But
we can go back to our wives, who are always there to help build us up when we get something wrong.
Yeah, so I think that from that perspective, I think I try to do a good job of that, and just not be defensive. And so by not being as defensive with them, not letting my guard down with them, but not being as defensive with them, it opens it up for them to ask questions. And I try to create a culture of, hey, do you understand why we're doing this? Right. Not like, this is what I want you to do, go do it. Do you understand why we're doing this? What the benefit is for us?
And why your role is critical to get us there.
Yeah, and why, this is important for your brand personally as much as it is important for the bank itself. Yeah.
So much of that is establishing culture, and that the culture accepts that, right? If I'm vulnerable, if I go out on the limb, am I going to be okay? Kevin Gibson always tells me, he goes, I wish I knew what people would say as they walked out of my meeting, at the front of the meeting, because then we could handle it a lot better. And we're going to chat a little bit about that on Thursday, but sort of knowing those outcomes. We have to build the culture where it says you can. This is where one of the things we do over at Blue Ridge is a 360-degree assessment.
Yeah.
So anyone in the organization can submit and say, Dave's doing this and I like, and Dave's doing this and he doesn't. And it's always such a stressful event for me, because there'll be this anonymous shot. Dave loses focus sometimes, or Dave does this, and I'm like, tell me the context. Tell me what that was. I have one anonymous sentence fragment, and I can't piece together what it is. And to me, I'd much rather sit down with someone and say, help me understand. No consequences. But I can't grow as a leader or a manager unless we can chat about this a little bit. Do you think that you built a culture at Bank of the James, at some of the other places you've been, where people will come close your door and go, look, Mr. Dr. Ray, sir, I'm struggling with something you've done, and I need to talk to you.
Yeah, I think it's varied at different institutions, right, over the years, and I think that those that I worked closest with, I like to think that was always the case, right? There were, and I can definitely think at Rockingham, at United, at First, at Bank of the James, like there are people in each of those spaces where they'd come and shut the door and be like, listen, you really pissed me off with this, or you really upset me with this. But I can also, looking back, especially earlier in my career, I know there were people that got upset at me that I never knew about. I mean, I didn't find out until years later. And it wasn't that what I was doing was wrong, but the way I was delivering it wasn't appropriate, or at least wasn't appropriate for the relationship. And as they grew to know me and understood who I was, and I didn't mean anything by it, and of course I've matured, right? So that
Hopefully.
some of that, I hope, yeah, I've matured. To what degree is the question, right? So that's the other side. I think the other thing too is that, if you don't have the relationship piece, the feedback to me has never been quite as relevant, because, again, speaking to context, if somebody kind of is one-liner, hey, Thomas, was pig-headed at this. Thomas, he wasn't willing to listen to reason. Thomas is too strong-willed, or Thomas is too passive. Whatever the case may be, it's like, well, what are you referring to, right? Because in certain circumstances, I may be trying to be that way to get a point across or to get something done, or because, that's what we agreed to do, but apparently we didn't do a good job communicating that to you, so something got lost in communication. I've always said that all feedback is good, but not all feedback is important, right? If the feedback is coming from a source or from a relationship that's not relevant to what the discussion is, or it's coming in a way where it doesn't have the context, okay, I'll listen to that and think about, well, what are ways I could have offended somebody, or I could have done that differently, but it really doesn't carry weight. If it's feedback that's coming from a peer, if it's coming from a boss, if it's coming from somebody that maybe reports up to me, that feedback I hold a lot more valuable, because those are the people day in, day out I'm in the trenches with. And, not that I'm there to impress them, or not that I'm there to be their favorite banker or their favorite boss or their favorite guy, but what they think of me is probably a good indication of how I'm treating them, and I want that to be the focus, not necessarily what they think of me.
Yeah, those relationships really help transfer the connection from management to leadership, right?
Yeah.
One of my favorite Covey quotes talks about that. Management is about getting us up the ladder as quickly as we can.
Yeah.
Leadership is about making sure the ladder's on the right wall.
Yeah.
So a lot of that's about vision. Do you have a vision of where are we going? What's this bank going to look like a year from now? And how do each of my team members fit into that?
Yeah.
Do you think candor and vision are interrelated?
Yeah, I think so, because I think without candor, how do you convey the vision, right? Because I could sit here and say, I want to be the preeminent financial institution in the Shenandoah Valley. Well, what that looks like to Thomas versus what that looks like to my teammates could be totally different things. And so they could be going on a tangent thinking they're doing the right thing, and I have to reel them back saying, you know what, I've been there, I've tried that, that's not the best route. What I really need you to do is X, Y, and Z. Or if I'm not candid, I'm like, oh, you're doing good. Have you thought about this? Have you thought about that? I'm always dancing around the point, to the point where they just end up confused and don't think they're still doing a good job when they're not doing what I want them to do. And some teammates over the years have been easier to convey that to than others. And, so you again, kind of got to know the individual, right? But I think the reality is like, how do you can have the vision. Any good leader's got the vision. But what makes a good leader, a great manager, is how you take that vision and you bring it down to the individual level, and you be able to get them to grasp that vision in its entirety the way you see it. And I think that's always the struggle, right? I mean, that's what we're constantly trying to refine.
I think that's the chicken and the egg phenomenon,
Yeah.
right? Do I hire the team and then say, can you all help me with this vision? Or do you say, this is my vision, and now you look each team member in the eyes and go, Thomas, how can you help me get here? Andy, how can you help me get here? Ryan, how can you help me get here? And really put people in to go, I need you on this trip because your ability to do X brings us closer to this, and without you, we can't get there. So here's how you fit in. Now the candor makes sense because you go, we were on the same page. I think it's even important we put that in hiring decisions.
Yeah.
So we go, I'm going to make you this offer because I think you can make us better here, which is where we're hoping to get better in the next year.
Yeah.
And now when you have to have that more intense meeting of going, you're not hitting the benchmark that I set for you, you can throw back to go, remember when we first started this connection, this was the dialogue we had.
And I think, I've tried to do a really good job of that, on the front end, it's like, here is the vision for us in the Valley. Here are the values for us in the Valley. Here's how they, dovetail with the vision and values of Bank of the James at the corporate level, right? Here's who we are, where we're going, and what we want to be. So inviting people to be a part of that, and saying, and when hiring them into a role, and in this role, this is how you're going to fit into that. And oh, by the way, here's some other roles you can grow into, because when you're just starting out, you don't fully know where your needs and what your capacity is going to be. And so I think the challenge though is when we're a young organization like us, as we've grown, we've hired people in to do a certain role, but we've hired good people. And so they've moved up quickly. And we recognize that, you know what, there's more skill sets there than what we've hired them for. We thought that was the case, but we're now just learning what those skill sets are and how they can be, how they can help us out. And so trying to then fit people into different roles, but not lose sight of that vision, right? Because the easiest thing is, hey, I want you to do this job. And they think, okay, this job is my future. Well, maybe it is if this is what you want to do the rest of your life, but this doesn't have to be your future. This just has to be your future right now. And this is how it fits in the vision. This is how it can prepare you to do other things later on down the line. It's easier for me to see that because I came up through the banking system, right? Like I was that teller, right? I was that frontline person. I was opening up those little equity lines and CDs. I was the backroom analyst, and then kind of moved on up the ranks. So I can see how different paths get you to the same point. It's harder to convey that, right? And especially in a world that we live in where everybody wants a roadmap, everybody wants a syllabus, everybody wants to know, okay, how am I going to get there and how quickly am I need to get at each step? And in my experience, it's just not that laid out, right? I mean, there's too many other circumstances that factor in. But so that's where, again, kind of taking the vision, and we're being radically candid in that is that they need to know that they're doing the right thing right then and what needs to be done right now. And by the way, this is, you either are going the direction you want to go or, and even if you're not, here's some other ways that you can fit in down the road too, so that they know where they stand at all times, because there is just so much nuance. And so if they don't know where they stand at any given time, and there's all this nuance, they're just going to be confused and wonder, okay, is this even the right place for me? Is this the right job for me? Because I don't know what's going on and where I'm going. And that's what we want to avoid. So,
which may be okay in some cases, because you may have that person who interviewed well and isn't in the right seat on the right bus at the right time. Earlier, you brought us a reference about the superstars and rock stars, right? Yeah. The superstars are those high-profile people. They're looking to become the next president. They're looking to move as quickly as possible. The rock stars just routinely come in and do their job. You've been talking a lot about that people want to see that roadmap. They want to see the vision. Do we need some people who love being rock stars or content being rock stars? You hire someone to work the drive-through window. They smile. They give out candies and dog bones to the kids who come through. Maybe what we want that person to do is continue to excel in the drive-through as opposed to be aspiring to that next role all the time. So let's say you're rebuilding from scratch. You can hire rock stars and superstars. How do you balance those two people as you're trying to build a healthy organization?
Rightly or wrongly, we've been faced with that exact challenge. And we've always chosen superstar over the rock star on the front end. Because we are a growing organization. So if you put a couple of superstars, we're all going to have to do rock star work along the way. That being said, if we were to grow to the point we're ready to hire somebody tomorrow, I'd be great to bring in a rock star, right? I think because then that gives capacity for the superstars to do what they need to do and to grow at a faster pace. So it's not to say that we're not open to rock stars or that some of our superstars couldn't transition into that role. I think at the more corporate level, you see that a little bit more within the broader corporation that supports the efforts that we're doing here, because you do have those kind of steady people that are just like, this is my job, this is my trajectory, this is what I want to do, and we could not run the bank without those folks, right? And then you've got the people that are more growth-minded that, they want to grow, whether it be they're growing strictly from personal and pocketbook reasons, or whether they're growing because they like being part of a bigger, grander vision. At the end of the day, as long as they're doing it the right way and bringing in the right kind of customers and taking care of folks, it's going to help the bank and help everybody. So I guess from a rebuilding standpoint, I wouldn't trade anybody we've got on the team right now. I think when we first started out, we probably hired a few more rock stars early on because we just needed to get the doors open. And as we've kind of grown, we've sort of, as those folks have moved into different roles, either elsewhere, we've filled it in with somebody that's more of a superstar. And it's not a knock on anybody that we've had be a part of the system, and we've had some superstars come through too. But it's just a matter of, okay, at different times, what have we needed? And if we're in growth, superstars is what we're going to pursue. But I don't know, I kind of feel like I'm talking in circles.
No, I think you're spot on. But as you talk, I have this billboard in my back of my mind that's blinking that says that's the way we've always done it.
Yeah.
So as you talk about promoting from within and bringing these superstars along and finding opportunities in more management, that could run the risk that everyone's grown up in your organization. So you're not infusing outside ideas into middle management, senior management. How do you then make sure that you're not, I don't want to say stale because I don't think it's a stale thing, but how are you not getting in a position where everyone grew up there, so we don't see
Yeah.
sometimes the dirty laundry in our own house.
Yeah.
And you're not challenging the process.
Yeah, I think so. The way we handle it, right, and then there's maybe more than one right way to handle it. I think the way we look at it is that it's hard for us to go out and cherry pick another banker, experienced banker, and bring them into our system. The banking industry as itself doesn't have good, training programs for young, aspiring bankers like they did 20, 30 years ago, and especially a generation ago. And so if you're going to grow an organization, it's very expensive to try and cherry pick people that may or may not fit with your culture. It's a lot easier to grow, just get good people, and then train them to be a banker, right? And so what you lose in that, what you gain in that is that, sometimes, you don't, sometimes the dirty laundry is just, we got to wait for that load to cycle through, and we're not going to solve that right now. You bring somebody from the outside, they're going to point to all these things like, well, we're working on that, but I need you to focus on X, Y, Z. Well, our folks don't necessarily know what all that is.
Sure.
But leadership does, right? Everybody who's in a leadership position in our institution came from somewhere else. Many of us have, because of mergers and different things, have worked at different organizations. So we bring a diversity of experience so that it's not just all homegrown. So the challenge for us is that the leadership does that. The leadership brings those new ideas, is always pushing for change, continuous improvement. How can we be better? How can we grow better? And I think our board does a good job of holding us accountable to that. Internally, we really have taken an approach of we're going to grow the next generation of Bank of the James employees from within, because we feel like we can train them the right way, we can give them good experiences, and we got great young people that I think can do awesome work.
It's through that continuous improvement cycle, right?
Yeah.
Scott introduced us to it and called it the Get Stuff Done wheel, and let me give you one of these for just a second. And you remember the Get Stuff Done wheel, but she talked about the 7 things we have to do, and I don't know how close you can catch this, but it was listen, clarify, debate, decide, persuade, execute, and learn. And my question to you, Mr. Ray, is where do you think many organizations stumble in this process of getting stuff done and moving forward?
Yeah, I think my experience has been it's either in decision or execution. I think we've developed cultures in business that do a decent job listening. I've had some maybe folks I would work with that I don't think fit that category. Maybe people have said that about me over the years. I don't know. But I think we do a good job of we've got so many different ways to bring in information. And I think, part of listening and clarification becomes a big piece of that, at least in our industry. When you've got, and bankers in general, we are always in the negotiation process, right, with our customers. So the debate piece comes naturally to us. I think it's in the decide. I've been at a lot of places. I worked with a couple different teams over the years where, we talk about stuff, and just won't make a decision, right?
I labeled that, right? In my first book, we talked about that, and I said that's a raw organization.
Yeah.
Because they go ready, aim, subcommittee, new team, new leadership, aim, and you're going, why don't you mess it up and we'll clean it up?
Yeah.
As opposed to just continuing to sit here and aim. So the decide point is spot on.
And then the other thing I see where sometimes we decide as a management team, and we've even been guilty of this, where we decide as a management team, this is the route we want to go. And you check back 90 days later, and it's like, okay,
we've done nothing to move any
we're in the exact
closer to
same
that at all.
spot we were 90 days ago, right? And fortunately, those haven't been real big strategic things that have hampered us as an organization. But even still, you got to do that at the small level if you want to be able to do that at the big level, right?
If we do our job Thursday, Thomas, it's not an ending, but it's a beginning, right?
Yeah.
We plant the seed in the foundation. So if you could give a call to action to people who are going to be there, to people who could watch what we're going to talk about or follow up in their organizations, what would be the one thing or the first thing you would challenge our peers, our fellow parts of this community to do to make their organizations better as a result of this effort?
Yeah, I think the challenge, I think, from my perspective, because I've been to a few of these keynotes over the years, is that when you go to these things, you hear a great message. You're like, okay, that sounds really good. That was really entertaining. I felt like I got something out of that. But then it's quick to show back up the next day on Friday morning and do the exact same thing you did the Friday before. So how do we, as leaders, say, okay, how can this change me? Not how can this change my organization, not change my management, not change my employees. How can this change me? I think if we all take that introspective look and we're open to that idea going into it, I think the cumulative effect of that will be really strong here in the Valley. We got great organizations in the Valley. Let's just make them better.
Absolutely. I couldn't have said it better myself.
Yeah.
Well, special thanks to Thomas Ray for joining us this afternoon,
Thanks,
having
Dave.
this conversation about candor. We're excited to see lots and lots of you on Thursday. Those we don't, we're going to rebroadcast on WBPT and WHSV sometime in September. Thank you all so much for being with us this afternoon.